Welcome to the Supplement Engineer Podcast. My name is Robert Chinetsky. Joining us today is world-renowned powerlifter, the trainer of trainers, co-founder of Build Fast Formulas, and the mad scientist of strength himself, Mr. Chris Duffin. How are you, sir? Thank you for joining the podcast.
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, man.
So before we started the recording, we were talking about your background in engineering. We share a common thing that we're both engineers that have segued into the world of fitness, supplementation, nutrition, and all that stuff. So walk the listeners through. I'm sure they're more familiar with your roots in Kabuki Strength, but I'd like the focus of this conversation to be mostly on Build Fast Formulas. But walk us through a little bit the transition, how you got from engineering into strength and eventually starting a supplement company.
Yeah, well, my roots in this go way back. I started lifting in 1988. And so I lifted through high school, and I did take a brief break while I was working on my engineering degree for a couple years out of that, but I got right back into it. And I've just found that there's so many things from that engineering mindset. The things that drew me to that are what have kept me in fitness, and why I turned into a supplement junkie as well, is just that it's kind of that test, retest methodology, and being disciplined at it. You see results over the long term when you do this. That like, hey, I'm gonna check this change in my training routine. I'm gonna check this change in my diet, my supplementation. I'm gonna track it just like I do, a project at work or statistical analysis, right? It's that drive of attention to detail that a lot of people may not have. And then if you have that, again, it's because training is a long process. It's a year over year over year. So those people that are focused on the short term are usually ones that aren't in training a long time to begin with. But this allows us the time to really find what works and refine these minutia that you wouldn't discover in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 months of trying something on the fly. That go, I didn't really feel that. I can't tell the change, versus really tracking the data. I mean, like I've got, before the podcast I mentioned, I have spreadsheets on spreadsheets. Like some of my old stuff I was just sharing with our diet and nutrition coach here at Kabuki. And I'm like, oh, no, this is how the ways that I monitor, body fat over time, and how I balance between the different types of measurements between, hydrostatic, skin calipers. And I'm like, I have these sheets that track this stuff all the way back, to early 2000s that I know what my supplementation routine was per week, what my weight was, and then like, I don't track body weight, arm measurements and stuff like that anymore, but they're all in there too. And it's like, well, and also tracking what my supplementation was, so that I know during that time I can reflect back and know what was working, what wasn't, my comp schedules, my results, all that sort of stuff. And I think I think that engineering mindset is useful in that regard, honestly.
Absolutely. When you first started getting into training, do you think it was the kind of the process and the methodical nature of that goes with engineering that parlayed itself into fitness, or were you kind of always wired this way? Because so often, and you've been in the game now for over 30 years of lifting, but so often we see people when they jump into training these days, or even using a supplement, they want to see results like within 4 days of starting something. Were you of that mindset? Did you find people back then when you first started training still had that kind of like instantaneous results mentality, or is it something that has kind of become more commonplace in the age of social media and instant gratification?
I think it's become more commonplace in the last 15 years, for sure. So when I started, we're talking late 80s, early 90s, a lot of the material, when there just wasn't a lot of material to begin with. So it was people that were in it without having, the instant feedback, obviously, of like people likes and other things that you see. And it was just a different mentality. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of information in general. So I can't say it was better, because, oh my God, the amount of information in the decades I spent chasing some of the wrong training methodologies and things, because they're just like, what was your source? It was a Muscle and Fitness magazine and Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding and Bill Pearl's, book. And that was it. And your feedback was the long-term reaction to people around you. Like, oh my God, you're getting bigger. Oh, look at you. But that doesn't come right away. Right. So it was really different. And there's a lot less people involved in physical culture than there is today. So I think that we definitely see some negatives from the fitness or the the social media, but I think we see some really positives. So much more people are affected and involved in physical culture today than there ever was, and at least my viewpoint.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of them are transitional, but I think some of that transitional is a little bit more coming and going. And that's just, I think we've always seen that to some level. We always, it's that time of year, we're coming up on the 1st where gyms would be full of newbies.
Absolutely.
And not this year though.
Yeah.
just
the world isn't finished ending yet.
But at the same time, like I remember training through all the years. How old are you, Robert?
I am 35.
So you're at the age that a lot of people would not be training, right?
Yeah.
So if you go into a normal gym, which you can't right now, but take a look around and look at the age of people, and you'll find that everybody is 25, mid-late 20s and younger,
right,
and mid-40s and older. So basically that the family child years, there's hardly anybody at the gym. Nope. So there always is more coming and going. I think it's just a little bit more frequent nowadays. And my training partner pointed that out to me one time. He's like, look around here. There's nobody your age. And I'm like, and it was the gym we owned, obviously. And I'm like thinking about the members. And I'm like, yeah, there's nobody here my age with kids that stick through this long term. And I think that ties back to that engineering kind of mindset, that the discipline, the consistency, those other things. And so I skipped past your question of what came first, chicken or egg there. I don't know. I don't know.
No, that's perfect. And you brought up a really interesting point. So it's like we have this age gap where there's, I guess it's like mid 30s up to early 40s. People aren't in the gym. It's the younger one and the older population. And I think it was Greg Nuckols and Eric Trexler. They were talking on the Stronger by Science podcast, that just talking about like the wealth and the breadth of resistance training literature is either on like college individuals or the elderly when they're trying to combat like sarcopenia and muscle wasting stuff. But there's not a bunch in like that sweet spot of like 30, like mid 30s to like late 40s, somewhere around there. And I wonder why that is.
Yeah, I always find that interesting when people want to pull research and quote, and I'm like, obviously you use that as a foundation, but there's a certain level of like, anytime you start digging, you find that the representation of who they're testing isn't the athletes or the gym bros or anybody that we're working with, right? So we've got to take a little bit of that, but also, think about how that applies to the people that are doing this in and out, for decades, that are pushing that. It's sometimes it's relative. A lot of times it is, other times it isn't. And it's you definitely have to have that foundation, but you can't just be waiting on that research to pile up. And there's a lot more on it in diet and supplementation. So I'm speaking a little bit more into the Kabuki or the movement world, where it's, some of this stuff, best practices, to discover what's going to happen for spine health and things like that. It's like, okay, if I'm going to wait for the research, I'm going to be 10, 15 years behind the ball of what I know works right now, because I can test with a population of people right now. I can get results over a short period of time, and I know what's working and what's not. Like, I can here's one person, and I know if I do this, I'm going to get a result. Okay. Right. I'm going to do that, whether the research isn't there yet, because it takes so long, and those type of studies are much harder to set up. But you're still going to have some of the same thing play a role in both diet and supplementation as well. So it's always this balance. And this is, I'm sure Greg and them talked about, evidence-based. So evidence is not just being able to quote research.
Correct.
It is also the evidence of what we have in front of us and what we're able going, here's my background and my discipline and how I implement things. And this is the experiences that I have with those population sets, and mixed with, here's what the research is telling us. And that's people miss that. And so the person that just sits there from, the kid that's sitting there in Starbucks and pulling read, and he's $1.20. He doesn't have evidence based. That just because you're able to pull some research to validate your background or what your statement is and be able to quote some citations, if you can't put it to practice and deliver results, you don't have the whole picture.
Absolutely. Since you mentioned that we're coming up on the new year, and this episode's actually going to debut on January 1st, 2021, something I wanted to get your input on. Yeah, it's a perfect way to kick off the year. What I'm worried about is, like, obviously you've got a strength background, powerlifting. If somebody is just coming into the world of fitness, like we see these group training classes, we see Zumba and all this stuff, what, in your opinion, will be the ideal way, or, you know, maybe optimal way to get somebody just into the gym to start getting healthy? Should they start with like a focus on, you know, more powerlifting, power building, hybrid, bodybuilding style training? You know, what would you think?
So, you know, there's nothing beats building an accumulation of muscle over time. So whether you want to lose fat, whether you want to get stronger, having a lower muscle mass on your frame is going to help net some of those results. And even, you know, the woman that doesn't want to get too bulky, you will honestly be surprised at how amazing she looks if she puts a little bit of muscle on her frame. It's going to bump your metabolism up. It's going to make you stronger regardless. And I think that's kind of objective number one, in my opinion, is to spend some time doing that. So, and so it's really easy. We got to think about minimal effective dose. And so we're not talking minimal effective dose of supplements. We're talking minimal effective dose of training. So going, hey, I'm going to jump into the gym and I'm going to start training 7 days a week. You don't need to do that. And so you want to save these things for later. You know, just go in, hit a full body routine 3 times a week. All right. Nothing complicated. Okay. And again, I'm focusing on, you know, some sort of bodybuilding hypertrophy type approach would be the best, in my opinion. So nothing counter to group fitness, CrossFit, those sorts of things, but those are valuable. And if you're lacking in work capacity, let's say you're really overweight, you're cardiovascular, you're just like don't have any capacity. Maybe you need to start there so that you can have the capacity to train. So there's a little bit of caveat here, right? But doing something that is more metabolic conditioning related, you see great gains in a short period of time. Let's see if I can get this on camera. But you kind of peak. And so we see this with like people that get into CrossFit a lot, that they'll see great success for 2 or 3 years. And then they just quit going anywhere because there's only so much progress that you can make there. It's not necessarily additive, such as strength training, resistance training, and accumulation of muscle is, where you can build upon that over time. You reach a point. So you need to have enough of work capacity or cardiovascular capacity, however you want to phrase it. It's a little mixture. There's actually a couple slightly different things there that we're talking about, but they net out the same thing. What's my ability to get in and complete a workout and recover from it, right? So you're going to develop some of that in the strength training process. And that's why I mentioned maybe start with a whole body. So we're, you know, short rest period times between sets. So, you know, pick 90 seconds to 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes rest between sets. You know, keep it fairly minimal, be able to push yourself. You're going to get a little bit of both of those going on there. If you're not able to do that, you probably need to spend a little bit more time maybe doing some of those other, you know, classes type things, or more time on the stair climber or the bike, developing some capacity to do those sorts of things. Okay. So there's a little bit of balance of finding that, but we start there. So minimal effective dose, you're going to get a response from that. Your first 6 months, you're going to start leaning out. You're going to start putting on muscle, right? Now we can start doing a little bit more. Okay. Maybe you could, you know, in the bodybuilding world, you know, they even use the word split anymore. That used to be so common.
It's weird. It's like we've gone from like the bro split to high frequency, and then now it's like the debate is going on like volume versus intensity. I'm thinking, I don't know how we got to this stage of it. Like, why is it one or the other? I mean, obviously you're gonna need sufficient amounts of both to get results. You can't just do super high egregious amounts of volume with like 5-pound dumbbells, and you can't just do a 1 rep max one time every other
Exactly.
week and gain muscle. It's just, it's weird.
Exactly. So, and this is a big deficit. So like if I told people, oh, go jump in and find a strength training program, they're going to find something out there that's probably going to have them working out heavy once per week on a core muscle group. And that's just not freaking enough for most people to be able to make progress, honestly.
Right.
So it's working more on a neurological aspect at that point in time. So the sweet spot for me is really being able to hit something at least twice a week. So, and I'm sure in Greg, when you had him on, if you guys talked about frequency and stuff, 2-3 times a week, the research is definitely showing that that's good. That's where I said 3 times a week starts getting to be, that's really challenging for the average person getting into it to have the level of discipline to be able to hit everything that frequently. Right. And so twice a week is pretty manageable, and that's really good results. And so that's a great target point. So, so now we're going to start, you're going to start with this 3 times a week, whole body routine. And now you're going to start being able to add a little bit of load. And we're going to go to breaking this up to maybe you've got 2 sessions that you're working through the whole body. And that allows you in 4 sessions to be able to hit everything twice a week. And you're able to bump the load up a little bit more, start realizing some more results. We upped our total weekly volume. We actually dropped the frequency maybe a little bit, but the volume is going to net out to the same over the course of the week. Okay. So that area is going to work really well for years. You're going to be able to run with that for a long period of time and be able to play around with higher loads, higher volumes, changing around your rep routines, just focusing on kind of balancing where you want to be from a hypertrophy and strength standpoint. I recommend doing those in blocks. Excuse my burp. How embarrassing on a podcast. I had to drink a Diet Coke here. I just did another podcast this morning, and I got started, and I'm like, oh my God, my throat's dry, and I didn't get to down it, something. And this is the only thing I had available. Anyway, 4 to 6 week chunk of time, really focused on a quality at least of going, hey, I'm working on hypertrophy. Maybe I'm going to be in the 7 to 10, 12 rep range for 4 or 6 weeks, something like that. You could push it into a larger cycle where it's 3 or 4 months as well, and mix in a few like heavier strength sessions in there, maybe every 2 or 3 weeks, bump up at the end of a workout, hitting a couple heavy, or at the end of a group of an exercise or sets, drop down and hit some heavier stuff. Okay. And that's going to start working really well so let's do a hypertrophy block. I want to get a little stronger. What's the value in strength? Even if you're not a strength athlete, if I'm moving more load, I'm going to end up adding more muscle, right? So it's all about how do I manage how much load and work I can do in a given period of time. Let's just simplify this down first before I go further. Yeah. The more load and work I can do in a given period of time, let's say a week, doesn't matter, pick your time reference, the more progress you're going to make. If you try to push it too hard, you're going to overtrain and not be able to get it heavy on the next session the next week, or you're going to have a little bit of a nagging injury or those other things that come into play. Right. And now you're going to, again, not be able to train as frequently as much. So it's this balance of what's the minimal that's going to net me there. All right. So there's value in having a strength block too. It's something a little different. So maybe I'm going to drop down and hit something in the, 3, 5, 7 rep range for a strength block and spend 4, 5, 6 weeks doing that. Okay. As I'm doing that, I'm still going to want to maintain a little bit more of the endurance and hypertrophy that I developed from the prior block. So every couple of weeks, I'm still going to do a session that's going to be in that range to maintain that quality. All right. And then you're going to do the same when I get back into the hypertrophy block. The loads are going to drop down a little bit. I'm still going to be pushing myself. Right. But maybe I'm, hitting, 4 sets of 10, something like that. Just pick a random number. Once every 2 weeks, I might, at the end of that session, I hit my 4 sets of 10. I'm going to drop down and hit 2 heavy doubles. All right. That's it. but that's enough to maintain those neurological adaptations and the strength that you had from the prior block. So you're not going to have to restart there. So you're always stair stepping it. This is how we stair step that up. So really valuable things to kind of think about in that process, and that again, that minimal effective dose. And you mind if I keep going on this subject a little bit?
No, absolutely. No,
okay.
Man, this is your platform. I'm just here to ask questions. And if you want to rant and roll and don't let me speak for the next 45 minutes, I'm perfectly fine with that. So keep going, man. This is great. Yeah.
So, well, the next piece here is talking about how do we, so if I can do more work in a shorter period of time, people look, well, I'm going to start training 7 days a week. I'm going to start, 3-hour-a-day sessions. Duffin said more work. Well, I also said, if you do too much, you're going to end up hurting yourself. And there's some science behind this. Okay. The science is, so there's two words we want to think about here. One is chronic load. That sounds bad. And the other is acute load. That sounds bad too. Chronic is average. What have I been averaging for the last few months? So what is my weekly load? I just pick week as a time frame. You could pick 10 days, but it doesn't really matter. What is my average load per week over the last few months? All right. If I take, so acute load is your short. So in that same period, a week, if I take my acute load and bump that above my chronic or average load by over 10%, I am going to put myself in this increased heightened risk of injury area. This is where 80% of injuries come from. And they usually don't happen that way. They happen about 4 or 5 weeks later. We potentiate this injury risk, right? And so if you give that in mind, that gives you an idea why I can't just go, hey, every week I'm going to just jump at 10%. Well, that next week at 10% again is going to be 20% over your chronic, which puts you into that area. You can't do that. So you have to slowly stair steps this stuff up again. You see a consistent theme here, right? And this is the science and the way you do it. And it takes time. It takes time. And it takes years to be able to build it to the capacity where you're training at those really high level. People watched my training in the past. Mm-hmm. It took me decades to develop to the level where I could handle that level of load, that level of frequency with what I do. You can't do that. You will hurt yourself. This is just simple facts. So this is really good for people to understand, especially if they get online and start looking at different programs and go, I'm going to follow the small lob bench routine, or maybe the listener don't know who that is or not, but you're going to find these really high frequency Bulgarian methods and other stuff out there, and negate the fact that it took those athletes 20 years of training before they did that. Right.
Right. And
so you can't just pick that out of a book and go, I'm going to follow such and such's routine to get there. Well, there is a development process to get there. And so this is an important thing to understand. But as I do this, it's very simple science. The more work, the more load that I'm able to pack in a shorter period of time, the more progress I'm going to make. And so this ties into kind of some of the stuff we do with Build Fast, though. Mm-hmm. All right. So it comes down to recovery. And this is why I'd love to talk about VasoBlitz for a little bit. And again, I don't need to pimp VasoBlitz. You can find the same ingredients. I just challenge you to find it at the price effective manner that we have with VasoBlitz. You can find it via dietary means as well, but you might have some distress from that amount of beet juice and all the other stuff that you need to have. But the value is taking these nitrates on a daily basis. The calcium lactate, the fact that it's in lactate form, these things that are in our product, they're in there for a reason. And people think about it, it's great as a pump product. And this is how a lot of it's marketed in the bodybuilding world, as a pump product. It swells up the muscles. It feels great. You look vascular and full during your workout, but it does so much more than that. So how do I pack in more training in a given period of time? I recover well. Number one, how do I recover well? The highest priority is sleep. All right. I don't have a product to sell you on that. To spend the time to get good quality sleep, look at your sleep and look at your behaviors that are affecting it. I wear an Oura ring. I'm able to track it and monitor. Hey, if I have 2 drinks at 5 o'clock, it doesn't affect my sleep. If I have more and later, it affects my sleep negatively, the quality. Making sure I get to bed at a consistent time. You'll find this stuff. I can't help you with that. Okay. I can't sell you a product. I'm not going to. I'm going to provide you some information. Okay. But if I can enhance your blood flow, so all the other stuff that I do on a recovery standpoint, I'm a big proponent of blood flow restriction, of moving daily, getting out, doing some walks. Like all this stuff actually helps your recovery. A lighter session. If I've got 4 heavy sessions a week, I might still actually do a little bit of light work somewhere in there on some of those off days to stimulate that process and get an effect that is going to flush the muscles, going to get the nutrients to get the turnover, get all these things to happen. Well, I can also do that with supplementation. So those things, they're vasodilators. I always say the name a little bit wrong. Vasodilator. Anyway.
Yeah, I say vasodilator. I mean, there's not like a pronunciation dictionary for the supplement industry. I've learned. I kind of wish there was, because there's so many like these plant extracts and things like that. It's all over the place. So you just take a shot in the dark and hope you're right.
Yeah. So vasodilators, yeah, that's what gives you the pump, right? It's improving blood flow into the area. It's making you look more vascular. It's making the workout feel great. But if we take these on a daily basis and let this build up in your system like you would with creatine, it's going to do this on a daily basis, even when you're training and resting. We're going to be turning it. We're going to be fueling the muscles. We're going to be fueling recovery. This has a tremendous impact on recovery, and can do a couple other really cool things too that we don't think about. So if I have a couple day break in training, I just did. This Christmas break. I don't know if anybody experienced that. Did some traveling, get back to training. I ended up spending probably a week not in the gym. All right. I jumped back to training. I want to take a little easier, by the way, because I don't want to do, now I've dropped my chronic load, right?
Right.
So I don't come back week number 1 and go, I'm going to crush it and make up for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because then you're going to go over. Right. Well, I'm also going to continue taking my VasoBlitz, because when I come back, I'm actually still going to be full muscularly. I'm going to have full muscle bellies. I'm going to walk into the training session full and ready. If I didn't, what I would do in the past is I'd have to actually spend a day or two doing a full body routine again to flush everything, get it full. Because if I walked into a training session with the loads that I use and was flat and depleted, I would not have a greatest training session. I wouldn't be able to do as much volume. I wouldn't be able to do as much load. I would have a higher potential risk of injury. This is just straight fact. Okay.
Correct.
Not scaremongering stuff like that's, it's amazing. So for a strength athlete, it's absolutely phenomenal. The people that are doing actually, when you get really specific and you're not doing, high volume, high frequency, and you got very specific, it's a great way to actually walk into a workout. Cause again, I would do the same thing. If I was squatting heavy once a week, and I haven't done work for a few days leading into a session, I would actually need to do a little bit of like leg training just to get ready for the really intense session. And now I don't have to. So it does some really, really cool things that people don't think about outside of this pump aesthetic piece. It's one of the best things that you can do for enhancing recovery. And so the research shows that it enhances recovery, it enhances anabolism, it enhances hypertrophy, right? And then if you actually combine that, so that's what the studies show in general with a fixed training program. So this is where the research doesn't show you. This is where the evidence-based knowing of what I can actually do with myself or clients when they're doing that, right? I can actually get better training in. I can get a little bit more frequent training in. And what does that net us? Well, I can refer to research that tells me if I have more higher level of frequency and load in a period of time, I get greater results. So your base level research on just the products themselves aren't going to show you that. It's a matter of putting all this stuff together. And that's where the beauty of a lot of these things come into play that people don't think about. The calcium lactate, it's actually an energy source. It's really cool stuff. Start looking at some of the research that's popping on it now. But it's used even by the brain in like key like fight or flight instances or other things. Like it's really cool. When lactate was looked at as bad as like this byproduct of negative byproduct that was causing you pain, post sprinting and other stuff like that. Right. When actually it's coming in as a fuel source to be able to come in when those other things aren't happening. And it's incredible. And so this is why lactate in the research is actually showing a huge impact on your ability to how much load you can do in a given training session. And so I believe we're probably the only company. I'm letting the cat out of the bag on this. Like I really haven't wanted to talk about lactate for so long because people just love VasoBlitz, right? Because and they know a lot of the prime ingredients and like, damn, this stuff is amazing and works. And so I haven't really wanted to touch on that because I don't want, pretty soon a lot of other companies are going to start jumping on that bandwagon because they don't know some of the other secret juice that's in there. It's the wrong word, but it is an incredibly powerful thing. And then when you pack it with the other products that we've got in here that a lot of people are familiar with, it gives you this power packed punch. And, you know, like we say, you know, day one is great. You know, day 7's better. You know, day 18 and beyond is an experience. Like you will find that. Like it's crazy once you start using VasoBlitz. God, I sound like a pitchman here. It's hard for me not to get excited about things I'm passionate about. So sorry. So
that's awesome. No, keep going.
People listening, I just get this way. It's not me trying to sell stuff. I just really passionate about this. But like, it's hard to imagine training without it. Once you've been training with those type of products, the effect that it has on your recovery, the effect that it has on your training sessions, and then oh yeah, it does make you look better and give you a nice pump. And so those main things that everybody else sells it on and why they're not pushing it on a daily. We are the first company out there educating people on the daily use of nitrates. Guess what? It works. And the research is out there now showing this. Okay. And it is phenomenal when you actually do this beyond just using it as a pre-workout. And that's why we have it as the non-stimulant. Okay. And that's how we launched our company. Can you imagine? We launched a company on a non-stimulant pre-workout. Like, what kind of move is that?
That's a ballsy one because usually it's like the high stim. Give me like the crack and stim pre-workout, and that's going to kind of set the barometer for where the rest of the company's going to go from there. But it takes some gumption to launch, be the flagship.
Well, we really wanted people to understand what it was, so it was quite a while before we launched Full Blitz, the training day that's got the stimulants and the nootropics all packed in there, right? Because we wanted to acclimate people to using and understanding the power of VasoBlitz as a standalone, because it is such a thing, and get people like, well, I'm just not going to use it on my off days because I'm just, economy. I'm just going to take the pre-workout. It'll be fine. Like, no, let's take a risk. And we're going to launch this with something that nobody else would, again, have the balls to do. And we've done that. And it's still just a phenomenal product on the market. And I said, if you push anything as far as training, as far as diet, even those people, like I know, like professional bodybuilders and a lot of the top strength athletes, they use other supplements, right? Guess what? This is going to make everything in that regard work so much better. I couldn't imagine not using any of that and not having VasoBlitz actually delivering everything to the muscle, causing like, I don't know how to dance around that subject, but it's like, that is one of the best products that you could use if you're in that world, honestly.
Also from like the BP lowering effects of several of those ingredients, because some of those special sports supplements, we'll say, can have an adverse effect on blood pressure and all that. So anything you can do to help modulate blood pressure and cause some vasodilation is definitely going to be a good thing.
Well, that's the funny thing, because again, nitrates have a bad rap themselves in some areas too, because people think that it's going to have negative consequences on heart health. Well, let's talk about like some of the other stuff with this, that the overall health benefits, right? We're going to lower blood pressure. We're going to reduce the incidence of cardiovascular disease. I'm not talking out my ass here. Go on PubMed here, okay? We're going to reduce the risk of both catching a viral, airborne viral contaminant. And if we do speed the time that it is and reduce the amount of effects from it, right? We're going to boost our immune. We're going to, I'm not going to say the words because I'm not going to try to sell it on. We all know what's going on in the world right now. Like, go just pull the research and reach your own conclusions here. But the heart health is absolutely huge, and it's very counter to what like people believe in the regular world. I think a lot of people listening to this podcast probably understand the positive benefits of that. If you don't, it is absolutely huge. There's a lot of people in the healthcare world or alternative medicine that are actually selling nitrates specifically for their aging populations and prescribing them in some occasions as in a medical manner for heart disease. All right, for longevity, and that is a fact. And then there's what else does it do? It's going to enhance the bedroom as well, for both male and female. Anybody that's used it knows this sort of stuff. But again, what is it? It's similar to the same sort of products that are out there that enhance the, let's get up and go. So it's going to enhance that experience. So yeah, it's an amazing product. Okay. I sound like such a freaking pitchman.
No, this is awesome. And one of the things is like the calcium lactate, that since you touched on that, we get bombarded with new pre-workouts every week in the industry, if not on a daily basis, certainly every week. And nobody does calcium lactate. So I guess I can walk the listeners through how y'all stumbled upon it, how you encountered it. Is it something you used before you created VasoBlitz and you just thought, hey, this is going to be a really cool addition to the product that's kind of an under the radar ingredient?
Yeah. Well, there's an individual I've worked with and known, had a great relationship with for a long time, that's been in the supplement industry, and he turned me on to it and started reading the research on it. And it's a little bit limited. We're starting to see more in the last 2 years, and so there's just at that point test by using, which we had to have it actually made up to produce. To be able to use. And yeah, that's trial by fire. The experience was finding that it does deliver what we're, the limited information that we are seeing in the research, but it's a critical part of the energy production cycle for muscular contraction. Yeah. That it is a component. It's just like once you understand the physiology of it, it's just like, here's what the Krebs cycle is. This is what it is. This is how it processes, and it is a fuel source in this process at those specific times. And so if I can provide it, you're going to get a result from it. I mean, that's the simple fact. Now, it is a mixture, just putting, this is huge in any world as it relates to stimulus and the raw materials, and even like things like acupuncture. People think, where the hell am I going with this? You have to have a lot of things to make things happen. It's not just the product itself. That's the raw materials. So you have to have the raw materials, but you also have to have the stimulus within the body, right? That is going to create it. It's just like, let's take calcium, for example. If I drink milk, I'm going to enhance my bone density. No. Okay. If I provide a load on a joint or on a bone, am I going to increase bone density? No. If I provide raw materials and the stimulus, by the way, and the load actually creates an electrical connection. That happens. It's very similar to welding, actually, and it causes. I've got a whole video on bone density, but you have to have the stimulus and the raw materials, right, to work together to create change.
Right.
If you're lacking those, like if I'm training and not eating, am I going to get adaptation? No.
Correct.
Okay. If I'm eating 500 grams of protein a day, am I going to get muscle? Am I going to get, turnover and creation of new muscle? No, not if you're sitting on a couch and never move. So this is some base level stuff, especially when you start looking at research again, to understand, is it applicable? Right. Because a lot of people want to look at those things and go, well, the research says that doesn't provide this. Well, yeah, but I need to do that. So like I mentioned, acupuncture, like acupuncture, same thing. It's providing electrical stimulus in certain areas, may do things, may not. I may take a supplement. Well, there's actually, I could take a nootropic and actually get a stimulus from or some raw materials for a nootropic, create a stimulus via training or create stimulus via some other inputs, and actually then get effect and actually make things work. So again, you're going to see mixed results on a lot of different things out there on the research because of that. You have to have raw materials. You have to have stimulus for a reaction. It's like all chemical reactions to actually happen.
Absolutely.
I know I went on a random tangent there, but it's important for people to understand.
That was awesome. I think I'm gonna like excise that little clip and like just upload that as a separate, like in conjunction to the podcast, so people can kind of understand like this is why sometimes supplement studies or training studies aren't, you see like a null effect, or maybe it's just trending towards significance, but they don't find a significant effect because there's so many other contributing and confounding factors that go into whether you get, you know, the result, the intended result you're looking for or not. It's not always just it's because of this one thing. There's so many other variables at play that either you can't control for or would be just impossible to control for.
It's like, oh, they did provide training, and then look at what the training was. They did leg extensions with 10-pound repetitions for blah blah blah. With it's like no, there's no stimulus for that type of person that you were looking at.
Exactly.
That's not a stimulus.
Right. Let's rewind back to when you first started training. Do you remember like some of the first few supplements that you ever experimented with, and maybe what were some of the pitfalls you fell into, and what were some of the things that actually delivered some really good results?
I've got some embarrassing stories here. Okay.
Let's do it then. That's always the best kind.
God. Like I said, there was really no information. There was no internet, for one. Well, maybe there was. I didn't have access to internet. This is like back in 1990, 91-ish to somewhere in there, right? I remember when I got to college in 95, that's when I discovered the World Wide Web.
Yeah, AOL. And I think that's probably when AOL was getting real popular, or CompuServe or something like that.
Yep. But they sold Cybergenics at the gym I was at. So is that still around anyway?
I don't think so. I've heard of it. I don't think it's around. I'm pretty sure it's not around anymore.
And then I got into, well, it's all about calories. Calories were the only thing. I'm not sure what I read. It was something in Arnold's Schwarzenegger's. And so I'm like, I got these mass builder shakes, which were just straight carbs, fat, and a little bit of protein. And I'm pounding these down, and I'm like, well, more calories is good because that's all it is. Okay, I'm getting so many. I'm just looking at the calories per scoop, and I'm working at a restaurant, and I'm like, well, I'm going to pour this in milkshakes. Gonna power pack this. I did that for a couple of weeks, and one of the people I was working with, he's like, man, you're not looking so good. You're looking like, what's going on? I'm like, what? Of course I'm looking good. I'm pounding down like 7,000 calories a day right now. Like, I'm getting huge. It's like, I don't know if it's having the result that you want. Like, because I lacked rudimentary understanding of diet. Like it was nobody at that point had explained. Again, understand, I'm young. Like I'm a freshman in high school, sophomore somewhere in there. And again, there's no exposure, there's no ability, there's no social media, there's no internet to be able to find any of this information. Right. All I've got is a few people at the local gym in the small community that I lived in. And so, yeah, I went down this track of not understanding what protein was, the difference in macros. And so I remember from there, like going into Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding and trying to memorize, because nobody explained to me like, well, things that run, swim, or fly are protein. And so I'm like memorizing things like, okay, so beef is a protein. Okay. And this is and I was trying to do it like by individual products, not understanding like the scope of like these type of things fit in that environment. So it's pretty damn embarrassing when you reflect back on it. Even now you would like a teen, like thinking that, but the access to information and what I had like was, probably high school health class, which I hadn't taken yet. Yeah. And so, yeah, here I am making milkshakes with Mass Builder.
Fantastic. How did you, at what point along the path did you segue and start? So you had Kabuki Strength founded. At what point did you drop the hammer and say, hey, let's start up Build Fast Formulas?
Yeah. So it was, Well, like I said, I've been a supplement junkie for a long time. I was sponsored by a pretty large supplement company for a number of years, and then exited that relationship sometime around when I started Kabuki Strength, just because I had too much going on, and but I'm still training at a high level. I'm still using supplements. And I just started reflecting on it, and even I get a lot of pushback still on like, why are you involved in supplements? It just makes you a shill. And I'm like, but I'm just not being authentic to my true self. Like, I believe supplements are not the answer. Like, it is the cream and the icing on the top, right? You have to nail training. You've got to nail your diet. And this is why I kind of exited, my relationship with supplements companies, because nearly all of them out there, at least at the time, I'm not keeping up on what competitors are doing today, but we're representing supplements as the answer. And this is the thing that's going to be what makes or break you. And I'm like, that's not real. That's lying. Right. And I can't be affiliated with this environment. So I'm like, maybe I can go about this in a manner that is authentic. And so I've known Matt Coleman, who's co-founder with Build Fast through the years, through my relationships again, because I actually did work with supplement companies, and we talked, and it's just like, man, what if we did just that? We curated a company and said straight up, like, nail your diet, nail your nutrition. Let's give some education on this stuff, and this is the piece that's going to give you that little extra couple percentages on top. But you know what? That's who I am. I'm always looking for that. And I'm doing that. Like, this is like an essential part of like my everyday life is training, eating, and managing what I'm doing from a supplementation standpoint around all those variables to fill those gaps. And that's, and I'm like, let's be authentic to myself. And yeah, some people may still think that maybe I'm a shill or whatever, like, but I'm being true to myself. This is, to say that I don't use them or don't believe them is complete fallacy when I've got stacks full of drawers full of supplements, and I'm constantly testing and if somebody reaches out to me, I'm going to make sure that they're covering the bases in some of those areas. I mean, just simple with the product 80-20. It's a basic protein, right? It's a mixture of whey and casein. That's what it is. Okay. Well, guess what? The two work together synergistically, right? So they each work actually better when we put them together. And it actually works better in a lifestyle when we understand it is a supplement and it is not the base foundation of what you should be doing. So what better way to fill the gap than actually having something that has this huge anabolism and anti-catabolism window that I only need to take a little bit of here and there through the day, versus saying, I need you to take massive amounts of protein all day long, and then push whey protein, which is, that's, if that is your belief that supplements are the answer, that's the product that you end up developing, versus something like 80-20, which is phenomenal, which makes it so easy in my life, so much easier for me to manage my diet and nutrition. I don't like eating a lot for breakfast. I'm just not a big person. But I've got, I'm pretty big guy, got a lot of muscle mass. So walking around not eating is going to be not good for me if I've had this huge gap, right? We have these micro, it's not just, anabolic, from training, and I'm going to be building mass for the next couple of weeks. No, it's like all day long, you're bouncing between anabolism and catabolism, right? There's these little micro things. So the more I can have an effect on that through diet and supplementation, the better, right? Correct. So because I don't eat much in the morning, I had to run to work. I had my daughter with me. She's coming with me with a few things I'm doing today. Wife and the youngest stayed at home. My son's busy doing something. I'm like, I got a bunch of stuff going. I got to get to work, get rolling with podcasts. I got time for a shake and an English muffin with a little bit of walnut butter on it, right? Walnut butter, we can get into the diet stuff. There's a reason for that. The English muffin gives me just enough on the carbs that I need for my needs for where I'm at in the day. I don't have time to cook up a steak in the morning, right? I've got some packed here for lunch. that I cooked up last night, but I don't have the time to sit down and eat that. If I took a whey shake with that, I'd have a huge spike, and then immediately, it's so fast. It's in and out of your system so fast, and then you're dropping right into that window. And I'm not going to get to eat again for 4 or 5 hours before I'm able to sit down and have my lunch, which is a certain set thing to get me prepped for my training in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. Well, scoop and a half of 80/20, my English muffin, my walnut butter, I've got everything covered. I'm good. It makes it so much easier. And I'm going to get all the way through, and then I'm, before bed, I'm going to take another scoop. Make sure I've got that window covered, because all afternoon, evening, as I'm going through my training and dinner, and I have second dinner, so my meals are kind of spaced a little bit. That's what fits my life. Right. So it makes it so much easier to fit in your life as a supplement. And then that makes you design the product a little bit different, right? So we have such as, 1 scoop a day is going to be phenomenal. 2 is going to be great. Timed appropriately around those windows. If you can hit 3, man, you can cover 24-hour windows with that, and then just add, your diet is doing all the other pieces for you. So it's just, I think it's that frame of mind switch. But anyway, that's how I got started with Build Fast. Is I got started with Kabuki, exited my relationships with supplement companies, and then just sitting back and reflecting and going, I'm not being myself. I do believe in them, but let's do it in the way that I believe. And I think you can see that in the products that we're releasing.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, the quintessential example is like the old Muscle Tech ads from, I guess, the early 2000s. Like when they released CellTech, increase bicep size by 47.5% and grow it, grow your quads 12 inches in 3 weeks with this muscle builder or whatever we got. It's luckily most of the companies these days aren't doing that, and for a good reason. The FDA is also cracking down a lot more. But you're starting to see more companies take like kind of the honest and genuine route, like y'all are doing, where it's just like, hey, these are great products. But without your diet, training, sleep, stress management, none of this matters whatsoever. I mean, there's still some of the shady, shenanigans out there, but we're transitioning.
Yeah, and I think that's good. So you mentioned my earliest supplements, and so I was mentioning stuff from the early 90s. Well, I got into it again, late 90s, 2000s, and that's when I could name supplements that people might actually remember. And yeah, some of the first was CellTech, so I remember the really expensive Muscle Tech protein. I don't even remember what it was, but I remember the CellTech, because man, I'd take a big scoop of that and it'd go right through me. And then later, as I started learning about stuff, I'm like, wait, this is just that's just a massive amount of dextrose right before I go what the heck? This
Absolutely.
And those were my experiences about a little over 20 years ago, getting back into the supplements and that market. And it's, it was crazy how they'd sell stuff. They do just straight lying, here's an IFBB Pro, and show them in the early days, and do the comparison and go, this is 6 weeks on CellTech. Oh yeah. Oh my God, you gained 40 pounds of muscle. And it's like, yeah, that's just such a far out there, straight up lie and fallacy. It's insane to think that companies were doing that, right?
Absolutely. You mentioned walnut butter and getting into nutrition. We can touch on this just briefly. I'm gonna venture a guess and say part of it has to do with maybe the omega-3 content of walnuts. But what's the other? Is there any other reason why
it's actually the omega-6s, and the omega-6s get a bad rap because the research shows some negative stuff on it. But that is because it has a high oxidation level, and so omega-6s in most environments is a vegetable oil or something like that has been used in cooking, frying. Something of that nature. And so a pure omega-6 actually is going to be really great. And so having a higher balance of PUFAs, your polyunsaturated fats, I find having a really significant performance for myself. And if you do the research and look at it from the standpoint of not looking at oxidized omega-6s or ones that could be, you're going to see very different stuff populating in the research as far as the impacts on it. But yeah, it's omega-3 and omega-6s, but walnuts are almost pure omega-6 the PUFAs. And so that is, I want to have a little bit of that in my diet. So So my wife actually blends up a walnut butter because it's not really something that you can get, but we really control the quality of our food. Anybody wants to check out what I eat, if you go on my channel, you'll find my wife's Instagram. So she would have been on MasterChef this season, signed the contract with Gordon Ramsay's company, but COVID happened and they canceled the season. When we were dating, she was living in Canada. Same thing. She was going to be on MasterChef Canada, but she was dating this freaking washed up powerlifter from America and decided to move down there and didn't make it on MasterChef Canada for that reason. But she started this last year. Once we realized the season was canceled, decided to just start building her brand herself. And so she's been pumping out educational content on cooking, and it's not necessarily healthy. It's just really high, amazing foods. And you'll find that if you do that, it actually ends up being healthy, but you'll see what I eat and see, that in practice. So it's JVQUELINE on her Instagram, or again, Jacqueline Duffin. If you type that in, I'm sure it'll pop up. Or if you go on my page, you'll find one where she's tagged. You see the hot lady in food, that's her. So
I'll include links to her stuff as well as your stuff in the show notes so people can find it. I'm gonna have to go look up her recipes. My wife and I love watching Top Chef. I mean, I love to cook stuff. So like we'll watch Top Chef, and we watched the first few seasons of MasterChef. I don't think we watched the last 2 of them. I don't think. But I like Ramsay, and I like the Graham Elliott and Joe. What's his last name? Whatever Joe's last name was on MasterChef. I can't remember it. But yeah, that was a really, really good show that we enjoyed when it first came out.
Yeah, so she's sponsored by Piedmontese beef, which is an amazing beef that we eat. Actually, it's the highest nutritional content beef out there, highest protein content, and just freaking phenomenal tasting. Anyway, she's due on her IGTV is the actual recipes and instructions, and then she's posting up a lot of other stuff. So it's just really great content. Occasionally I'll repost it, and sometimes you'll see it on the Build Fast Formula account as well. So we try to we're trying to share what works and what's out of our lives that we do, and show that authentic piece of who we are and what we do and how we got to where we're going. So it's like you can see it all. Like,
yeah. Excellent. All right, bringing things home here, Chris. There's one thing. So you've got in the supplement section. This is going to kind of tie into something else. You've got Drink Hack, the supplement, and you've got whiskey and deadlift shirts that you are famous for. So
yeah,
my question for you is, I love bourbon. Do you have a particular, like, are you whiskey? Are you a rye guy, a bourbon guy, Scotch, Irish whiskey?
Bourbons for sure. Bourbons absolutely, hands down. And the reason is whiskey and deadlift. So if you ever have a shot and then try to do something, you don't want that peaty aftertaste or anything coming. Bourbon is just so smooth. And honestly, you can get an amazing bourbon for $30 to $40, where if you're a Scotch person or something like that, like, that's bottom of the barrel. Like, you got to be spending hundreds to get a good bottle. So bourbons, American-made bourbons, are just amazing for that regard. So really smooth, excellent choice for quality. And so, yeah, this is, again, me being me. Like, guess what? Yeah, I don't drink every day, but I enjoy some bourbon here and there, right? And I did a piece actually around the time I launched Kabuki Strength, but I'd been testing the use of alcohol as a performance enhancer. And you go, what the hell? What are you talking about? Alcohol as a performance enhancer? No, it's not. It's not in the fact that negatively it impacts it. It spikes cortisol levels. It negatively affects testosterone. It puts you more in a catabolic state, stops anabolism, like all sorts of negative things, right? Yeah. So if you want to be healthy, don't have alcohol. All right. But it's life, right? A glass here or there is going to be, a glass of wine's good. Like, you're going to have that with it. Let's be real. Like, I'm not going to sell you on some ultra hardcore straight edge life. You know what? If it's our anniversary and we're going out for dinner, I'm going to have a few glasses of wine. All right. If I haven't seen a friend for a while and he comes over, I might crack open a bottle of bourbon and we have a whiskey on the rocks. But I actually was testing it as a performance enhancer in a very unique way. So I was doing a little thinking and observation. I noticed a lot of Russian lifters back in the day would take a shot of whiskey before they would go out and lift. I'm like, what the heck is this about? Right.
Figured they were doing vodka.
Very consistent. And then I started looking, I'm like, oh, alcohol was actually used in the original Olympic Games and part of it for quite some time. And the very first person was used, it was actually the very first failure of WADA tests. The first 2 failures were for alcohol. It's a banned substance for shooting for a long time because it's a performance enhancer. So the old biathletes that would do the skiing and shooting, they would be almost falling down drunk at the end of the things, pulling up because it would calm the nerves, improve their shooting. And no, it's a real thing. It actually, this famous marathon race from the 1906 Olympics, it has a place in there. Anyway, I won't go into all that. Mm-hmm. So what we find is it has a negative effect long-term and it has a negative effect short-term, but it has actually a positive effect in just the right amount in a very, very near term. So it does some things. It spikes blood pressure, which is going to make the weight feel light. It's going to clear inhibition. It's going to do some things in this kind of psychological and also a little bit physiological manner that are going to allow you to be able to enhance focus, enhance the mood that you are in, make the weight feel lighter, and basically in a short term, improve your lift. So it's going to vary by person, but between a half a shot to, 2 ounces worth of alcohol about 3 to 5 minutes before a lift will actually increase your lift. And thus, I'm like, okay, so I need to make sure I cover all the bases. So whiskey and deadlift, I'm going to promote it for a lift that if anything goes wrong, the bar drops on the floor. Like I'm not going to something in bench and you drop a bar on your face and everybody's trying to sue me or, whatever. But essentially it works for anything in that regard. Also the metabolism. So it's 7 calories per gram versus, almost nearly as dense as fat, but it actually is a preferential energy source. It moves ahead of everything. Proteins, fats, carbs, and even ketones. Alcohol comes to the forefront. So you get this boom, huge boost, and then ties in with mood, which again, you're kind of in a heightened state. So it all feeds into this. So about 3 to 5 minutes post an ounce or 2 of alcohol, you have a heightened experience for being able to lift.
I cannot attest to the performance enhancing
People
effects.
thought I was joking at first, but you'll find whiskey and deadlifts has become a thing in the last 5 years. People probably don't even know where it came from anymore. But anyway, me being authentic to that, this is where Drink Hack came from. Not just the whiskey and deadlift, but guess what? Here and there, you're going to have some drink. I don't promote alcohol abuse by any means. I don't think anybody should have excessive drinks or drink too frequently. But if you're going to drink here and there, why would we not want to clear the negative toxin that is developed, help it eliminate out of the body so that we can not have the negative cardiovascular. So it's not just the liver. A lot of the damage that's done is on the cardiovascular front, but you've obviously got the liver as well. And just overall the sense of unwell-being called the hangover the next day, right? Yep. Especially if you don't drink very often, just a few drinks can actually make you feel not well. And so Drink Hack is it's a proven product that helps eliminate acetaldehyde, which is it's formed in the process of the breakdown of alcohol within the body. So pretty straightforward stuff. I don't promote the use of abuse of alcohol by any means, but let's be real. We do have some drinks here and there. Why not have something in your plate that can help, get rid of the bad piece of that?
Absolutely. And I've been forthright on the podcast saying from a performance standpoint, not necessarily physical performance, but mental performance, I found that an afternoon old fashioned or bourbon will definitely help get the creative juices going. It's a superb mental lubricant when I'm stuck on something I'm trying to write, and it just.
We actually do that for our podcast a lot. We'll line up, we'll do a shot right before the show starts, or even with a guest, because it lubes the process. So in my article, I talk about this because this is the reference material I help to explain how it works. Mm-hmm. So think back to in your early 20s and you're you're in a bar and, you see the hot number across the way that you want to, wow, that may be the woman of my future or the man of my future or whatever. And what do your friends say? They say, have a shot of liquid courage, Yep. Well, if you have that, one, like all those second thoughts and everything kind of drop away, right?
Yep.
You're more confident. You go up and you actually perform better. You're more articulate, verbose, engaging, like all the things come into play. You're more you and you perform better. But if you sit back and have a 4, 5, 6 beers before you go over there, guess what? You make a fool of yourself.
Yep.
So it's all about timing and amount. But we all know it does these things, right?
Yep.
And so, yeah, it can be used in that manner. So, and it's great for stimulating that because it comes into play. It's doing some physiological things, it's doing some mental things. And it's a huge, like, boom, quick burst of energy that drops in there as well and enhances everything that you're trying to do. But as a whole, where do you go from that? It's a downer. It's a depressant, right?
Yeah.
So we just have to understand that. And I think that's just important. It's an odd conversation for people but once you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, it does do those things, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Do you have a top 3 or top 5 bourbons that you regularly rotate between or experiment with or recommend?
The one that is my go-to for drinking straight, either on the rocks or up, is Willet. So Willet is really, really just phenomenal. It's got a really cool looking bottle. I love the cool
bottle, like the pot still bottle. It's so awesome.
Yeah, it's shaped like their man. You know your stuff. I like this.
Yeah, man. I had a friend of ours turn us onto that maybe 6 months ago. They recommended it, and so I have just a little bit left of the bottle. But I mean, it's just so cool. I think I just want to hold it for posterity's sake. Yeah,
and it's I think about $50, so pretty reasonably priced for the quality that it is because it is very, very premium. My next one for that would probably be Blanton's, but they've been bumping the price on that, and it's still I think it's like $55, maybe $60 for a bottle of Blanton's now. And so I find myself falling for the Willet because Willet's better than the Blanton, just a little harder to find because Blanton's more of the kind of well-known high quality one, right? And then Buffalo Trace is like my main one for mixing. So it's going to be like that $30 bottle. So it's really reasonably priced, really good quality. You can drink it straight as well. But Buffalo Trace is right there. But you can go any of those in that range. You're going to find Buffalo Trace, Bullet. Gosh darn, I can't think of the one with the red with the wax seal on it. Maker's Mark. So all of those are going to be right in that range of really high quality that can be used to drink straight, or maybe an amazing mixer if you want to go that route. And then shifting towards the Blantons, the Willet is being kind of the top level right there. So those are my go-tos. I'm always playing around with different ones though.
Perfect. I just had the George Dickel bottled in bond the other night that we were over at a friend's for the day after Christmas, just hanging out, and he cracked open a George Dickel bottled in bond. It's got a green label on it. That was actually I had never had any of the Dickel family of whiskeys, and that was actually a good one to try. So if you can find that, track that down somewhere. It's a recommended try.
Yeah, and then there's obviously the really expensive ones that go ridiculously priced. I just got offered a bottle for $1,200 for
Pappy's.
Oh, yeah, it was Pappy's. And I'm like, Pappy's is good. I ain't part of $1,200 for a bottle. Nah. No thanks. I'll stick with my Willet.
Exactly. Yeah, my go-to is Knob Creek, or I like the Evan Williams bottled in bond. It's their 100 proof. That's real solid.
Yeah, both those are really good ones. Yep.
What's coming up in 2021 for Build Fest? As far as new releases, new flavors, can you leak anything?
I really would like to talk to my partner before leaking anything, but some things that we have in works. We've got actually the next couple years all planned out. So it's just a matter of we're a small company, right? We're new in the field. We don't have big backing. We're just trying to bootstrap this along. So a lot of the releases are based on how fast we grow and what we can put back into it. But we have our product releases all planned out. Which is kind of interesting to think about, right? But we've some of the ones I'm really excited about is a really amazing glucose disposal agent that blows away. I've been a big fan of that because it's a really great supplement because it works so well with what you're doing with your dietary, as well as having a really great carb source. So there's tons of products in the market. It's a hard sell because really only the hardcore bodybuilder community really is into the intra workout carb stuff. But I really think that there's a great, it's a great product, especially when you mix that with a glucose disposal agent and combine it with a good diet. You get all these things together. It's absolutely phenomenal. Unfortunately, I think most of the products as carb sources on the market really suck. They're really underwhelming. They cause bloat, they cause dissension, they cause slushing, they cause not level levels of blood sugar where you've got spikes and then downers and all that. And so I'm really excited for those couple that we should definitely be seeing in 2021. Beyond that, I'll keep the rest of our what we've got coming under wraps for the time being.
Perfect. Final question. You mentioned nootropics earlier. Do you do any nootropics in addition to what's contained in the Build Fast formulas?
I do. I do a little bit of alpha GPC in the morning. Just my own chemical balance. It really works well for me. So some people are going to find benefit to other. The interesting things about nootropics is a lot of times it is raw materials for a lot of synapses that are happening neurologically, or not neurologically. Anyway, and so it's going to be biased a little bit on your own brain chemical reactions, and people's would have to get into psychology and other stuff. But there is reasons that some people are the personalities and the way that we work in the world is a bit and issues that people have that may be depression and anxiety and all this is all related to this. So that's the interesting thing about a lot of those things that fall in that category is they may or may not work because you may or may not need some of those raw materials to make some of that to assist in those reactions. So, the only one I use outside of those is I was going to say caffeine. So obviously I supplement caffeine in addition to the amounts, and I use caffeine beyond just my pre-workout, but would be the alpha GPC.
Perfect. Yeah, that's kind of like the final frontier, I think, from like the stim and focus side of like pre-workouts. But that like we know that
it's got to be tailored to, and there's ways you can actually find out what you are. Right. There's testing that's basically just like multiple choice type question. You can help really arrive at where your disposition is, and then you can know what nootropics would actually be more tailored for you. So interesting, but yeah, it would take a lot of education on that front, I think.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Awesome, Chris. Well, thank you so much for the time today. This was a really engaging and a fun conversation. This is the part in the podcast where you can shamelessly plug and shill anything and everything you want to about Kabuki or Build Fast. Oh gosh.
I'm not big on just like doing that, honestly. If people think, our stuff's of value, they're going to come and use it. If you want to find out more about me and my projects, you can just go to my personal website, chrisduffin.com. Social media, the two places that you'll see what I'm doing is going to be LinkedIn and Instagram. So LinkedIn sounds a little odd, but I have a lot of, I work with a lot of professionals in the collegiate and professional sports world. So that works well. And then Instagram is more of a kind of a closer look into my life and things that I'm doing and training and all that sort of stuff. Honestly, I haven't been that active this last month, but I try to answer some questions that come up on there and interact with people on both those platforms. My book, I really think that people should check it out. It's worth the read. It is a really powerful piece that has an impact on people's lives, and it sounds cheesy saying that, but it is written to do just that. I use the framework of the story of my life, which is a really crazy piece. I'm not going to go into it, but just read the synopsis. You'll get it. It goes from growing up wild in the wilderness to being a corporate exec, turning around aerospace and automotive manufacturing companies and dealing with serial killers and murderers. And it's all over the place. Pretty crazy stuff. But it uses that framework to help share what I learned from a process of introspection in life and philosophies, and helps you find those pieces yourself, and really help you find your North Star. where you're going, the values that you want to live by. I don't tell you how to live or anything like that, but it's a bestseller in self-help, human psychology, and a lot of different categories. And it has changed so many people's lives as a resource. So you can get a free Audible download of that and another book if you sign up through the link on my site, chrisduffin.com, or you can just find it on Audible, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, probably online Target too. It's around. So The Eagle and the Dragon by Chris Duffin.
Outstanding, Chris. Well, then I'll include links to that as well especially on the chrisduffin.com site, links to Build Fast, your wife and yours Instagram account for everything. And thank you so much for joining us, man. I know you've got a lot of irons in the fire, and we really appreciate this. It's going to be a hell of a podcast to kickstart 2021 with. So thank you, sir.
It's been fun, my friend.
Thanks. Have a good one.